Welcome to this morning's session of the plenary. I apologize for the late start. The order of business will be followed. Before we begin, I just wish to note one change or one error. Under the general section of the Executive Committee report, the working paper is actually working paper 628 and not 639 as on the order of business. We will commence with approval of reports from the Economic Commission, and I now invite the chair of the Commission to present the reports. Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Good morning, President. Good morning, delegates. I am pleased to present to the plenary the reports of the Economic Commission as contained in working papers 618, 619, 620, 621, and 622. The Economic Commission held 3 meetings to complete its work under agenda items 31 to 38.
618 covers the general section of the report as well as the report on agenda item 31 entitled Annual Reports of the Council to the Assembly for 2016, 2017, and 2018, and agenda item 32 entitled Economic Regulation of International Air Transport Policy. Under agenda item 32, the Commission endorsed the proposed work program aiming to move forward in line with the ICAO long-term vision for international air transport liberalization. Support was expressed inter alia to build a better understanding of the benefits of liberalization and barriers to opening market access, as well as the continuation of the work to develop a convention on foreign investment in airlines while addressing the remaining issues of concern. With respect to consumer protection, the Commission agreed to encourage states to apply the ICAO core principles on consumer protection in their regulatory practices and urge states to ratify the Montreal Convention of 1999. It was also agreed that ICAO should facilitate an exchange of views and good practices regarding the application of the ICAO core principles. Concerning the taxation of international air transport, the Commission agreed to urge states to distinguish taxes and charges in accordance with ICAO's policies, and conduct appropriate cost-benefit analysis before the introduction of taxes on air transport. Working paper 619 reported the Commission's deliberations on agenda item 33, entitled Economic of Airports and Air Navigation Services Policy. The Commission endorsed the organization's work program related to aviation infrastructure and system financing, as well as economics of airports and air navigation services. On the subject of funding for civil aviation authorities to perform oversight functions, the Commission agreed that ICAO should conduct regional workshops and seminars to raise awareness and knowledge by states of the relevant ICAO policies and guidance on funding and oversight, and to enhance their implementation. With respect to agenda item 34, entitled Aviation Data Monitoring and Analysis, the Commission endorsed the work programs in the areas of statistics, big data analytics, forecasting, and economic analysis. The Commission also agreed to develop the Aviation Satellite Account methodological framework. In this regard, the accuracy of the estimated result should be validated by vetting the methodological framework with experts using aviation-specific data to measure the economic impact of aviation in countries where such data is available. In addition, the Commission agreed that ICAO should share aviation data submitted by African states with the African Civil Aviation Commission, or AFCAC, and cooperate with AFCAC on the African Program for Aviation Data. Working Paper 621 reported the results of Agenda Item 35, entitled Economic Development of Air Transport. The Commission reviewed the consolidated statement of ICAO of continuing ICAO policies in the air transport field. Several amendments were agreed to reflect the discussions. With these amendments, the Commission approved its submission to the plenary for adoption, and the complete text of the resolution is contained in the appendix to Working Paper 621. Under the same agenda item, the Commission agreed that ICAO will provide technical expertise and support for the implementation of the Ministerial Declaration and Framework for a Plan of Action for Air Transport and Tourism Development in Africa, adopted at the first ICAO World Tourism Organization Ministerial Conference held in March 2019. Finally, Mr. President, the Commission's report on Agenda Item 36, presented in Working Paper 622, reflects the discussion of other issues considered by the Economic Commission. Under this agenda item, the Commission agreed that the proposal to establish a Global Aviation Competitiveness Index should be considered by the appropriate panels of the organization. Au nom de la Commission économique, me fait...
On behalf of the Economic Commission, it gives me pleasure to submit these reports for approval by the plenary. Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to thank the staff of the Secretariat for its excellent support to the Economic Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you and your team for the work done. Delegates, are there any comments or interventions on the reports just presented? I see none, so I take it that we're all in concurrence and the reports are approved. Thank you. We will proceed with the approval of the final report of the Credentials Committee, Working Paper 638, and I invite Iran to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to present the final report of the Credentials Committee, Working Paper 638. At the first meeting of its plenary held on 24th of September 2019, the Assembly agreed to the establishment of the Credential Committee. The first meeting of the committee was held on the same day, and it was composed as follows. Mr. Alberto Mena Padilla for Chile, Ms. Glens Andrew for Fiji, myself for the Islamic Republic of Iran, Mr. Emmanuel Dubem Chakvoma for Nigeria, Mr. Alexander Batalov for the Russian Federation. I have been honored that the committee elected me as its chairperson. At the second meeting of the plenary on 24th of September, I presented an interim report to the Assembly and informed that at its opening, 173 member states and 46 observer delegations had registered, while credentials in due and proper form had been received from 164 member states and 43 observers. The Assembly agreed on the recommendation of the committee to urge all states and organizations that had not yet presented due and proper credentials to do so as soon as possible, and meanwhile, in view of Rule 7 of the Standing Rules of Procedure of the Assembly, to permit them to participate in its deliberations. At its fifth meeting on 1st of October 2019, the committee found that the credentials submitted by 182 member states and from 48 observers had been presented in due and proper form. I wish to express my sincere thanks to my colleagues on the credential committees and to the Secretariat for their hard work, which allowed us to complete our task as required. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairperson, for your report, and thank you and your team as well for the work completed. Delegates, we have just been presented with the final report of the Credentials Committee. Are there any comments or observations? I see none, so the report is approved. Thank you. We will proceed with the general section of the Executive Committee report, Working Paper 6 to 8. As presented, and I invite any comments or interventions on Working Paper 6 to 8. I see none, and I take it that we are in concurrence, and as such, this is approved. Thank you. Colleagues, we move ahead with our order of business, and we are at the approval of reports from the Administrative Commission, and I invite the Chair to present. Thank you. United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to present Working Paper 604, Report of the Administrative Commission. The remit of the Administrative Commission in this year has been broader than that of previous assemblies, covering budgetary, other financial matters, appointment of the external auditor, but also, on this occasion, human resources issues and one specific item on publications. In light of the constraints of time, I will summarise the activities on the report rather than deal with every item in turn. On financial matters, most items proceeded with little further comment on the working papers presented, reflecting the thorough preparation already done in the Council. The Commission recommends the approval of the ICAO budget for the triennium. Members of the Commission noted that the budget did not cover all items in the ICAO business plan and that prioritisation and innovative approaches to efficiency would be needed during the period. On human resources matters, the Commission noted progress made in a range of matters, Delegates called for greater immediacy in relation to the implementation of the whistleblower policy and changes to the ethics framework, and that is reflected in the actions. There were several papers related to gender equality and the advancement of the roles of women in aviation. While the various initiatives in this regard were welcomed by delegations, some concern was expressed about the slower progress towards tangible results in this area. Great importance was given to ICAO and states working with a range of organisations promoting these goals, as well as pursuing their own initiatives in this respect. One specific item on web publications was set out with the freemium option, as it is called, considered by the Commission. And the Commission invites the Assembly to endorse this option while noting its potential budgetary implications. Proceedings of the Commission were pleasingly efficient, with the main business concluded in one meeting, and as delegations will see, the report is contained within one document on this occasion. I would like to extend my thanks to the Secretariat and to delegates to the Administrative Commission for assisting the efficiency of this progress, and I commend this report to the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you as well, and your team, for the work accomplished. Delegates, I now invite comments and interventions on the report just presented. Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to thank the members of the Administrative Commission for all the hard work they've done. Mr. President, firstly, I want to correct a false impression being peddled in some quarters that some of us are against the whistleblower policy, transparency, and efficiency. There is no iota of truth whatsoever in that claim. ICAO Council created a subgroup to develop a whistleblower policy based on United Nations and global best practices. This group successfully completed its work and submitted its report to the Council. After deliberations on the matter, the Council instructed the Secretariat to input the text of the whistleblower policy into relevant ICAO documents, which include the service code, staff rules, and personnel instructions. Furthermore, the Council instructed the Secretariat to report back to the Council during its coming 218th session with the updated documents for approval. Mr. President, I'm pretty sure this plenary will totally agree with me that inclusion of the whistleblower policy text into these documents must be done in a meticulous and careful manner for appropriate alignment with the said documents as to avoid any conflict with any provision of these documents. This is especially true considering the fact there is already an existing policy on protection against retaliation under ethics framework in Annex 1 of the ICAO Service Code. We must avoid creating greater problems in the future and the resolution of any problem. Mr. President, what I find very disturbing is the attempt to get a resolution passed proactively on a policy that is not only being worked upon by the Council and the Secretariat, but also on an item on which no working paper has been presented to this Assembly. It is against all norms and procedures of the Assembly to request the Assembly to reactively pass a resolution, reactively. Any Assembly resolution to approve Clause 51.5c as is currently constituted will have circled all the good work being done by the Council and the Secretariat. In addition, Mr. President, the whistleblower policy relates to staff and employees of ICAO. And the only way for the staff and employees to understand and apply this policy is through these updated and approved documents. ICAO staff and employees can only be held accountable to the provisions of the service code, staff rules, and personnel instructions. Finally, my question to the authors of Clause 51.5c is, what is the motive behind the insisting on a resolution actively approving the whistleblower policy, despite all the excellent work that is being done but yet to be concluded? The distinguished Assembly, the premier body of ICAO, deserves a proper explanation and the real reasons behind clause 51.5c. Thank you, my President. That concludes my intervention.
Thank you. South Africa.
Thanks, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. Mr. President, the Assembly should guard against degenerating to discuss the issues or to further discuss issues that are discussed at the Council. It is setting a very dangerous precedent. Mr. President, we are called upon to endorse the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy, but we have not been provided with that document. How do we endorse the implementation of the document that has not been provided to us? If somebody wanted the Assembly to endorse a document, they should have done a working paper, present that document to the Assembly, and the Assembly look at it and make sure that we are happy with it, then we endorse. So we cannot endorse a document that we have not seen, and then we come and say we are endorsing. What's the legal basis for endorsing the document that we have not seen? We don't have any legal basis to endorse a document that we have not seen. Mr. President, the issue of the whistleblower policy is not something that has to be implemented, or it's not a standalone document that has to be implemented as such. It is true that Council has approved it, but then you don't. It's like a convention. You approve a convention. For you to be able to implement the convention, you must go and work on your legislation back home to incorporate it so that you can implement it. So I don't know how then this will be implemented if it has not been incorporated into the documents of the organization that drives the organization that are used in governing the organization. Mr. President, I don't know, we should really guard against this, and then we stick to the issues that really deserve to be brought to the Assembly. In our respective territories, we are grappling with this issue of the whistleblower policies. There are a number of countries here, they will agree with me that they are currently grappling with this issue of the whistleblower, whether now one is a whistleblower or is not a whistleblower. So to sit here at the Assembly to now start to address issues, and then we become subjective, and it's really not desirable, Mr. President. But the short and long story is that we cannot be expected to endorse a document that has not been tabled before us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd first like to thank the members of the Council and the Commission for their work. I believe that the Council has already ruled on this, and it is not for the Assembly to decide. And if we review this point, we have to review all of the Council decisions and discuss them. And that is not what this Assembly is supposed to do. So I strongly support the proposal by South Africa and Nigeria and other delegations speaking to this effect. Thank you.
Thank you. China.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, fellow delegates. Regarding 51.4, I hope you will all take note the very last phrase. Ah, 这个秘书处已经澄清，这个是理事会所管的事。那么理事会就说对这个。
2019, will be incorporated in the ICAO Service Code, which is due to be presented to the Council at its 218th session.
We have a procedural issue here. I don't want to go into detail on the procedural issue. I entirely support the statements by the delegates from Nigeria, Algeria, and South Africa. Totally support their interventions. That's my first point. My second point, it's a substantive issue about the policy for protection of whistleblowers. We support that, but we also object to malicious whistleblowing or abuse of the whistleblower policy, because that would affect the efficiency of ICAO and it would also waste resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Brazil.
Good morning. This was a very, very hotly debated issue in the Council. It was even an issue that raised a formal reservation from Brazil, which was supported by several other delegations, and still this was not taken into consideration. We, as was stated by Nigeria, approved in Council meeting in June the whistleblower policy. We seem to now be going back on something that was approved by the Council just because supposedly it was not put into the Code of Conduct. It still has to be looked at as far as getting it into this Code of Conduct, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It does exist. We did approve it. And I think that above everything else, we need to remember that we are a UN organization and that this is something that is going on in all the UN organizations. ICAO is a 75-year-old organization, but that doesn't mean that we have to be in the old age still or in the Stone Age. We need to implement something that is consistent with the values that we have nowadays. So I really think that we are not talking about it not being valid. The fact that it is not in the Code of Conduct does not mean that it was not approved by Council. So I really think that unless we want to open this very difficult kind of worms, that maybe we should just go forth with it. If, according to the distinguished delegate of South Africa, we have not seen the document, the Council has seen it, yes. If the other members of the Assembly have not seen it, then maybe we should adjourn our meeting until Monday morning so that everybody can look at it and then discuss it. Is that what we're doing here? And also, we have to ask ourselves, if we are not approving this Code of Conduct, just who are we protecting or not protecting? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Capo Verde.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to highlight the position on when it comes to whistleblowing policies, as some of the delegates have brought up. Specifically, the representative from South Africa, who presented it very well. This document regarding this area has not been distributed to the Assembly. Therefore, in our view, it should not be part of the deliberations of the Assembly itself. That does not mean that Cabo Verde or Cape Verde does not recognize the action. The whistleblowing policy as a good management policy, that would be natural, or it is natural that these policies need to be considered in the management tools that are coming up. And along those lines, we understand that this subject is being worked on by the Council. It has been deliberated on, has been debated on by the Council. And in our view, it should be refrained to that organization, retained within that organization. Obviously, as I was saying, we corroborate with those who support the whistleblowing as being a good management policy, but it should not be considered in isolation. It should not be considered in the sense of protecting the individual to the loss of the image, the good name, and the integrity of the organization itself. So it should be seen in the context or in a global context, and it should be promoted in the sense of respecting other determinations, rules, and instructions related to the management of the organization itself. Therefore, in this sense, we are completely in line with the observation made by our colleagues from South Africa, Nigeria, China, and others that have spoken to the issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Egypt.
شكرا.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Very briefly, we strongly support the sincere statements made by Nigeria, South Africa, as well as Algeria, China, and Brazil concerning the whistleblower policy, and particularly concerning 51.5C, particularly for the reasons put forward in those statements. We believe that they are logical. We believe that work in this regard must be transparent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sweden would like to raise 3 points. Firstly, we would like to thank the Chair of the Administrative Commission, Mr. Mark Rodman from the UK, as well as the Administrative Commission for its diligent work. We would also like to thank the Secretariat for their indispensable support for the Commission. Secondly, Sweden supports the outcome and the recommendation made by the Administrative Commission to, and here I quote, endorse the immediate implementation of the new whistleblower policy approved by the Council in June 2019, end of quote, which is spelled out in paragraph 51.5C of the Administrative Commission's report. Sweden stands behind this decision made by the Council, as referred to in the report, and stresses the importance and appropriateness of the Assembly to do the same, as recommended by the Commission. Thirdly, throughout this Assembly, it has been mentioned several times by numerous delegations, as well as by the Secretary General and the President of the Council, that issues of governance, effectiveness, and transparency, including the implementation of a robust whistleblower policy, is of the highest priority to this organization. It is therefore the firm opinion of Sweden that it is necessary to endorse and show support of the Assembly, which is the highest body of this organization, to this decision by the Council. And this is an opportunity that we cannot miss. This is a decision that has been made by the Council, and we, as the Assembly, need to show that we stand behind it. We also need to show our support to the Secretariat in its efforts to take action to ensure transparency, commend this work, and call for immediate implementation of the important decision by the Council to adopt this new whistleblower policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Senegal.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, delegates. I would like to begin by thanking the Administrative Commission's drafting team for their work. I will be brief. I welcome the item on whistleblowing. I believe that this is important work and this plays an important role. However, I would like to suggest that time be taken to review this point more calmly, away from the everything that's happened in recent months, and to consider all the implications of this item. And in view of that, I would like to support the comments by Nigeria and South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. South Sudan.
Thank you, Chair. South Sudan is in full support to the paper presented and the comments by Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and China. Thank you.
Thank you. Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ghana supports the position of Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, China, Cape Verde, Egypt, Senegal, and South Sudan concerning the whistleblower policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Tunisia.
Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to all. I should like to express our support of other statements made in this regard. The issue has not been taken up in the Assembly as required for consideration and approval. Furthermore, the Council has taken the issue up and has taken the appropriate decision in June of this year, and therefore Tunisia fully supports without reservation the statements by Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, China, and Brazil. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Saudi Arabia.
Shukran, Sayyid Rais. Thank you, Mr. President. Let me express my full appreciation and respect for you, Mr. President, and for this General Assembly. The whistleblower policy is an issue that we support. Perhaps all of us here support such a policy. However, Mr. President, I would humbly ask the Assembly to refer the issue to the Council. The Council is made up of 36 member states representing this organization with full trust of the General Assembly. There are trustees. Let me recall that this policy was adopted in 2017. It was said that it would be taken up by the Council once again, once included in the service code of ICAO. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Malaysia.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Firstly, Malaysia would like to thank the Commission for this presentation. Malaysia fully supports the policy of whistleblower. Nevertheless, Malaysia concurs with the stance made by Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, China, Brazil, Cabo Verde, Egypt, Senegal, South Sudan, Tunisia, and Kingdom of Saudi, which this policy will be incorporated in the ICAO Service Code, which is due to be presented to the Council at its 218th Council session. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. United Republic of Tanzania.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. The United Republic of Tanzania also supports the proposals made by Nigeria, China, South Africa, Malaysia, and so forth, that we cannot endorse the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy, the document that have never been submitted before us as a working paper before we can endorse. We call for the proper procedures within the Council on how such policies can come into effect. And I agree with the delegate from South Africa that endorsing the whistleblower policy immediately as it is, we shall be creating a very bad precedent within the procedures of the Assembly on how such policies comes into effect. So we should follow the procedures for the same. But although we support the whistleblower policy, but let's follow the procedures. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. France.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the colleagues who have expressed their opinion. I would also like to thank the Commission and its chair for the work that has been done. France supports the reports presented. As regards this issue of the whistleblower and ethics, we think it is absolutely essential, and we mentioned this in our general statement. We proceed from the principle that once a decision has been taken by the Council, it is for immediate implementation, and it's not reasonable to rest on bureaucratic procedures in order to deny the protection which the Council has decided to provide to people who meet the criteria of a whistleblower. So I'd also like to respond to a legal point which I heard, which deeply shocks me. Some said that since the Council was looking at this, the Assembly should not look at it. This is entirely wrong. In New York, in the United Nations Charter, it provides that when the Security Council is handling a point, then the General Assembly does not look at it. But we are not in New York, and we don't meet every year. We meet once every 3 years. And so if the Assembly should refrain from looking at a point that the Council is currently examining, then this won't lead us very far. We need to take advantage of the fact that we're all here and to be able to guide the Council in its work on this topic. Otherwise, there is no point in being here and meeting here. And we think that it is an extraordinary opportunity to be here with all of our members to look at this, to guide the organization for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Spain.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning to all. This delegation had comments on item 42, but since the discussion is focusing on 51, we are going to speak on 51 and then on 42 later. What is clear from all of the contributions from delegations and what everyone, I think, can accept is that this policy has been approved by the Council in June 2019. So that is a clear fact. I think it's also appreciated that all delegations at this Assembly agree that there should be a whistleblower policy. So I think we can be proud of that. There's a policy that's been approved by the Council, and the delegates of this Assembly agree that such a whistleblowing policy should exist. And I'd like to refer to something that was said earlier, a proposal to support or endorse the policy. In the Spanish text, it says support, respaldar, not the policy, but implementation of the policy. And this is a question I have for the chair of the Administrative Commission. Are we supporting the policy, or are we supporting implementation of the policy? That's my question. Thank you, Mr. President.
United Kingdom, do you wish to respond to that question?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm responding not as the United Kingdom, but as the chair of the Administrative Commission. My interpretation of the Commission's wishes here is that it is endorsing, as it says in the English version, the immediate implementation of the policy, which is a policy that already exists, of course. and it is, of course, quite common for the Assembly to request the Council to prioritise or to accelerate matters that it has already adopted or which are already in the work programme. There are many, many other papers that have come before us during this Assembly which direct the Council to do particular things, which urge the Council to place greater importance on things, etc., etc. And so, from the procedural point of view, this appears to be no different. Thank you.
Mozambique.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We gather our support to the others as in respect with the regulations that are established and care. That's why we approve without reservation all the points presented by the Republic of South Africa, Nigeria, Cape Verde, Brazil, as well as others who are aligned with this line of thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cuba.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honestly, I must say that we don't understand the turn that this discussion has taken on our policy in the Assembly, but we want to be clear that we too see the importance of this policy as a working instrument for human resources management. We also want to state that we are grateful for the work of the WGGE on the Council who drafted the policy, headed by the very professional and distinguished delegate of Sweden. However, we do not believe that it is appropriate to address this matter in the 40th Assembly. It's clear to us that the policy has already been adopted by the Council of ICAO, and it is in a Council decision, and also in the decision of the special session on August 15th, as read out by the distinguished delegate of China. This discussion should be pursued in the 218th session of the Council. And in that respect, we agree with those who have spoken before us: Nigeria, South Africa, China, Cabo Verde, Senegal, Ghana, Tunisia, and more. To the effect that this matter should not be discussed as proposed by the Administrative Commission here in the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just like to support the comments made by Brazil, Sweden and France. Mr. President, I am concerned that some delegations seem to be prioritising procedure over much more fundamental issues to ICAO as an organisation. It's important to note that the Council has adopted a policy on protection against retaliation based on UN best practice. And we are very concerned that the Council's decision has not been acted upon and implemented in a timely manner thereafter. For an issue of this importance to good governance and to the proper treatment of ICAO staff, who are, after all, our most valuable resource, Ireland is comfortable to approve the decision text 51.5c in the Admin Commission report, and I would like to thank the Chair and his Commission for their work. Thank you.
Thank you. Gambia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Gambia commends the work done by the Secretariat and the Admin Commission. However, we strongly support the statements made by South Africa, China, Ghana, and all the other states regarding the whistleblower policy and cannot endorse its immediate implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair. The Netherlands supports the position made by Brazil, Sweden, Ireland, and France. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Finland.
Thank you very much. Finland would like to support the position and views presented by Brazil, Sweden, France, and finally Ireland, saying that this policy should be implemented without any delay. It is approved and any delay is not acceptable. Thank you.
Denmark.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the Commission for the work done. Denmark supports the report as it is presented. We fully support the comments from Brazil and also the comments by Sweden and supported by France. We could not have said it better ourselves. We are of the opinion that it is perfectly normal and acceptable that the Assembly direct the Council and wish to remind the Assembly of the fact that we, the Assembly, are the sovereign body of ICAO. The decisions of the Council on the whistleblower policy and ethics framework must be implemented immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Italy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning, everybody. To be frank, our delegation has some difficulties to understand what we are talking about. The whistleblower policy has a special relevance in UN agencies. The Council adopted a new and advanced whistleblower policy in June after a very thorough work. Now, I understand that there are some ambiguities on the implementation of this important policy. The discussion has been held in the Administrative Commission. Now it has been brought to the attention of a plenary. I do believe that the Assembly cannot refrain from express the opinion to implement without delay the whistleblower policy. So I do believe that we believe that paragraph 51(5)(c) is appropriate as it is. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Belgium.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Belgium fully supports the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy as already approved by the Council in June, and we agree with the report 51(5)(c). That's why we also fully support without reservation the intervention of Brazil, Sweden, Denmark, France, Spain, Ireland, the Netherlands, Finland, and finally Italy. Thank you.
Thank you. DR Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. The Democratic Republic of Congo supports the work produced by the Administrative Commission. However, as regards point 51.5 on the whistleblower policy, the DRC agrees with the positions expressed by Nigeria, South Africa, China, and other delegates regarding the whistleblower policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. Greece also supports the outcome of the Administrative Commission. The whistleblower policy has indeed been approved by the Council in June. The framework, the substance is in place. If there is something to be done, it is of a bureaucratic nature. We cannot function in a vacuum. The whistleblower policy has to be implemented immediately, and we believe that the Assembly, as the ultimate body, has an additional responsibility to decide on issues of importance for participating member states. I therefore support in my turn the interventions by Brazil, Sweden, France, Ireland, and others in the same vein. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. We have asked for the floor also to voice our support to the proposals made by South Africa and Nigeria on the whistleblower policy. These comments have also been supported by numerous states that have spoken before us. These include Egypt, Ghana, Senegal, Tanzania, Mozambique, Algeria, China, Malaysia, DR Congo, Cape Verde, and Tunisia, not forgetting Cuba. So we fully support and endorse these comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President. Germany agrees with the report and recommendations from the Administrative Commission in its entirety as presented. In particular, we are very much in agreement with the recommendations under Agenda Item 51, Para 51.5c. We believe this is the right time, and in particular the right forum, to state that ICAO in its 75th anniversary fully supports and implements UN best practices wholeheartedly. We therefore do not support any changes to the text as proposed by the Administrative Commission, and fully support the arguments and statements made by Brazil, Sweden, France, Spain, the clarification given by the chair of the Administrative Commission, Ireland, Netherlands, Finland, Denmark, Italy, Belgium, and Greece on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Iceland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Iceland would like to support the outcome of the Administrative Commission and the comments made by Brazil, Sweden, and many other delegations concerning the endorsement of the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Russian Federation supports the position of Nigeria, South Africa, China, Egypt, Malaysia, and a large number of states, believing that the whistleblower policy should be discussed in the Council and not in the Assembly. Furthermore, the Russian Federation spoke in the Council on this and now believes that this text has not been fully drafted. So we ask what would be done with the whistleblower if there is someone who is in a high position in the organization and gives information to the mass media. So we cannot discuss any confidential information in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First, we would like to make a procedural point. A number of delegations have indicated that this matter is not part of the order of business of the Assembly. But if you look at item 11, it says Council annual reports to the Assembly. All Council reports, everything the Council does is to be considered by the Assembly. Even the order of business that we approved invites the committee to review all of the reports, and the policy is part of the reports. So the policy is up for consideration. So in that respect, that's the policy point, the procedural point we want to make. With regard to the substance, in all of the items considered by the Assembly is giving guidance to the Council and direction. And in other cases, the Assembly gives guidance to the Secretariat. So from a procedural point of view, we're surprised to see comments about the idea that the Assembly can give its view on all other items but this one. We can discuss Corsia. The Council gave its view on that. The Assembly is giving its view. And we're engaged in a lengthy dialogue on climate change. So we're really looking at all of the issues. And I think at the bottom of it, from a legal point of view, we don't go along with those arguments. And Spain asked exactly what we're discussing, and the chair of the Administrative Commission gave a very clear answer. We're discussing implementation of the policy. So in that respect, if we keep in mind that The whistleblower policy establishes rules for staff. I think it would be acceptable for the Assembly to indicate how important it is to be implemented immediately. It would be a political message. We don't have any objection to the report of the Commission as presented, and we can accept it as it stands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Austria.
Thank you, Chairman. Austria fully agrees with the excellent statements made by Brazil, Sweden, French delegation, and all the other delegates who supported the immediate endorsement of whistleblower policy. Thank you.
Thank you. United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before I actually speak on this topic, I wasn't on the floor yesterday during their remarks, but I want to express support to the delegation of China for their clearly stated concerns regarding transparency within the Secretariat. I'm sure most everyone here knows of the U.S. government's similar concerns on this critical subject, and I look forward to hearing more from my China colleagues on the Council on this important issue following the Assembly. I invite them to come, and I would like to compare notes, and I'd like to hear more about this issue that they expressed here yesterday. Before I make my formal statement, I just want to make a couple of comments on previous comments. I want everyone in this room to know that the service code that was passed on June 20th during the council session was negotiated between a small group of council members and the Legal Bureau. And the Director of Legal Bureau, I thank you for all those negotiations, but I want everyone here to know that they were repeated back and forth on the service code. Legal Bureau had concerns. We accommodated those concerns, and just prior to the last WGGE meeting, the Director of the Legal Bureau came up and asked for one more change that had to do with some dates, and we accommodated his concerns. And at that time, I asked him if we are in agreement and we have a service code agreed with the Secretariat, and he said that was the case. And so I just have to tell people the service code has been done. It simply hasn't been published because it's been stuck in the Secretariat. And all those documents, as far as I know, are passed to member states. There is no working paper needed for this council because this is a policy that's already been adopted. But Mr. President, really quickly, I want to state our total support for the Administrative Commission report. Protection against retaliation is an old concept. The United States enacted its first law about this in 1778. Protection against retaliation is an essential part of any credible management system, especially those dealing with aviation safety and security. If aviation sector workers cannot report problems because they fear retaliation, no one will be safe or secure when we fly. Mr. President, how can anyone object to protection against retaliation? And how can anyone think that ICAO staff do not need and deserve this protection? At the 216th Council session, the Secretary General called on Council to bring ICAO's protection against retaliation policy in line with UN best practices. And I hold up the UN best practices. This is the Secretary General's bulletin from November of 2017 that we used as the baseline in our negotiations with LEB. And this is a document that sets the standard that we are trying to go. So, as I said, at that session, 216th, the Secretary General called on the Council to bring ICAO's protection against retaliation in line with UN best practices. Council praised her initiative and took two immediate steps. One, Council decided ICAO would act in the spirit of the UN protection against retaliation policy. And two, Council formed a small group to update that policy, which I mentioned earlier. At the 217th Council session on June 20th, Council approved a new policy with the complete service code that was required that mirrors the UN's policy, which of course I just said is currently the best in the system. After this session, Secretariat staff disputed the validity of the Council's decision and have not enforced it. Secretariat staff repeated this assertion to us earlier this week. This is completely inappropriate and totally unacceptable. So if everyone wants to reopen this debate, I will be proposing a new action point in 51.5 between points B and C that states, welcomed the Secretary General's initiative at the 216th Council session to align ICAO's whistleblower policy with UN best practices, and reaffirm both the Council's approval of the new policy at its 217th session and the policy's applicability from the date of Council's approval. That would be basically a new paragraph between B and C. That's if we're going to reopen this debate. Mr. President, some might say that the Assembly shouldn't revisit Council discussions. The fact is, Assembly commissions and committees are revisiting Council discussions every time they review and change the working papers and draft resolutions submitted by the Council. Assembly is the supreme governing body in ICAO, as our legal director has explained. The issue here is one of follow-through. The Council decision is being ignored, and the Assembly must speak out. We owe this to the dedicated staff of ICAO who are working around the clock these last 2 weeks and tirelessly for months before that to serve us and the aviation community. So, fellow delegates, please consider your responses carefully. This plenary is being webcast, and we have media in the balcony. The eyes of the world are upon us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that there's about 164 states in this room in furious agreement about whistleblower policy and the fact that it should be implemented by everybody, and certainly here in ICAO. So what Australia is saying is that we obviously support the words that are in the document. We have a feeling that some people may be reading a bit too much into those words because, quite frankly, all they're simply saying is, can we get on and implement something that we all seem to agree with? So, Chair, let's hope we can do that. Thank you.
United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, the UK would like to put on record that we fully support the interventions of Brazil, Argentina and so many other states on this topic. The UK fully supports the draft report of the Administrative Commission as an accurate reflection of the discussions which took place and support the action at paragraph 51.5. It's quite clear that any organisation's most important resource is its people, and we need to ensure that ICAO staff have the conditions they need to thrive. I note that the Secretary-General and her team have done much good work in this regard, including the launch of a comprehensive people strategy to foster good working conditions. My second point, I've heard today several suggestions that the Council has ruled on this matter and that it's not for the Assembly to decide. Quite the contrary. The Assembly is sovereign, and it is completely normal for the Assembly to ask the Council to accelerate or prioritise items, and highly appropriate in a case of such importance of this. My final point, if this text were to be reopened, the UK would support the comments made by the United States. Thank you.
I give the floor to Legal Bureau at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. I have carefully listened to the statements of all delegations this morning, and I deem it necessary to make clarification. First of all, Legal Affairs and External Relations Bureau is part of the ICAO Secretariat. Its job is to provide legal advice to the Council, to the Secretary General, and other bodies, including this body. We also provide assistance, but we never, and this is not our mandate, to negotiate with the Council or with any member state, except in the individual contract, not in the way of the formulation of the whistleblower policy. We provide advice. The advice is taken or not, it's up to the receiver of the advisors. We are doing the same here today. No more and no less than that. That's the first point. There is no such thing as negotiation. Secondly, again as advice, concerning the issue of whether in June of this year, the Council adopted service code. I would like to underline the word service code. The consistent procedure of this organization, it has been, we just checked this morning, at least for 60 years, that the Council would first give the policy endorsement of a draft of the service codes. But it doesn't mean it has been incorporated into the service code. Normally it's a two round. The first round approves the policy, and the second round is incorporate in the markup version, and in the old days, we used the handwritten to incorporate them into the service code. Then there is a promulgation of the service code. This is two-step approach. I do not want the delegation here to be confused of that, especially as it has been said, this meeting has been webcast all over the world. Just as the Council, when they made standard and recommended practices, most of you are familiar with it, Council always has the date of adoption, date of effectiveness, and date of applicability. It's not necessarily the same date. We have checked carefully the records. There is no indication that the Council, when they made the decision to approve the whistleblower policy, that they want it to be effective immediately. I have the legal opinion here. If needs be, I could read it to these delegations, which just prove that. It's been diligently researched by more than one legal officers, including a legal officer having experience in the common law system that some states have taken the floor today. So I would stop right here, but I want to add one more thing here. I'm not very clear about as a legal advisor, I'm not very clear about what does immediate implementation means here. If it means that it implements something that has been retroactively as a date of the adoption of the policy, we cannot agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary General.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I'm listening carefully delegations' interventions, and also thank U.S. representative just indicated. As a Secretary General, I initiated the whistleblower policy in order to align the best practice with the UN. That's indeed, it's my intention, and it's indeed, I advocate and promote it in this organization. As back when you was the director of the Administration Bureau, I led the Secretariat to develop the service code ethical framework. And in order, we establish ethical framework for the first time in this organization. That's back around 2012. And also, after I took office as the Secretary General, I view the ethics culture as the framework is one of my priority in order to ensure this organization to uphold the highest standards of the United Nations in terms of value, in terms of principle, in terms of ethics. And I want to make crystal clear, I have no any intention to delay the implementation of the whistleblower policy. And I'm just implement the Council's decision. And as the Legal Bureau Director just indicated, we do our best efforts in order to ensure the policy to implement timely and also comprehensively. So I would like to thank the United States for your guidance in terms of ethics framework and also whistleblower policy. As you indicated, we did cooperate very well during our consultation in order we be able to produce, with the Council's support, the revised ethics framework to incorporate, to develop the whistleblower policy within less than 3 months. I thank the United States for your support, and also thank the Council members for your support. And so, for that sense, I think we have the common goal and common objective. So we're looking forward to continuous this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Colombia.
Gracias. Thank you, Mr. President. I must recognize the comments by the Secretary General, and I take this opportunity to say that Colombia supports the whistleblower policy as an important tool for transparency in ICAO. And I'm in support of leaving the draft of the Administrative Commission's report as is in English in paragraph 51(5)(c). Moreover, we are particularly in agreement with the procedural points made by France and Argentina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks also to the Secretary General and the Director of the Legal Bureau for their clarifications. New Zealand supports the report as currently drafted. We're comfortable with the Assembly endorsing the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy. We therefore support the comments made by Sweden, France, Spain, Netherlands, and others. Thank you.
President of the Council.
Thank you, President of the Assembly. We are having an interesting discussion in which, as I clearly stated, it seems everybody is in support of protection of whistleblowers. A number of issues and arguments that I see that is going on is to what should be the pronouncement of this Assembly on this matter. Reference many times is being made to the decision of the Council on this matter. I will read abstract from the decision of the Council for those who are not members of the Council. That the Council considered the oral report of its working group on efficiency, which appended a proposed text to align the ICAO Service Code in accordance with the UN Secretary General's Bulletin as well as the Joint Inspection Report on the review of whistleblower policy. The Council requested the WGG to undertake a review to identify possible revisions to the ethics framework that will align it with the current policy in the United Nations system. The proposed text had been presented by the WGG in its oral report, which represented the outcome of this review process. Following consideration, the Council approved the proposed text as appended to the oral report to be incorporated in the ICAO Service Code. The Council also noted that there remained a number of issues that have been identified by Staff Advisory Committee and members as requiring further consideration, and requested that an update be presented to the 218th session of the Council by the WGG, and to report on the actions taken by the Secretariat to revise and consolidate the ICAO Service Code to align the relevant staff rules with the Service Code as a result of this decision, as well as in addressing the outstanding issues. Additionally, the Council further decided for the WG to address any potential gaps that exist within the ethics framework in order to include provisions of the ICAO Service Code that will prevent the inappropriate use of the ethics framework, such as to maliciously defame or impugn the integrity of other persons. Now, there's over 2 meetings. The 218th session of the ICAO Council commences 25th of October. Was it 25th or 18th of October? 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. During which the Secretary is supposed to present the Service Code back to the Council for consideration, first by the Working Group on Governance and Efficiency, and by the Council for approval. The staff rules and policies are promulgated in the Service Code. And it can be a confusion for many as to what is the difference of what we are talking about. In the oral report of the Administrative Commission, a few words have been questioned. First one is endorse. The second one is immediate implementation. The representative of Spain mentioned that in Spanish, endorse is the same, it's written in Spanish as support. In English, it may give rise to some little confusion. Those who said the Council, the Assembly has endorsed in many documents are right. At this Assembly, the Assembly has endorsed the Global Air Navigation Plan, the Global Aviation Safety Plan, Global Aviation Security Plan, CORSIA. But those who also say that a document that is endorsed by the Assembly is presented to the Assembly for consideration are also right. The question has been raised as to immediate. What does immediate mean? That is a legal question that is being posed by the Director of Legal Bureau. But I've also listened to some comments of those who support the whistleblower policy, support paragraph 51C, use words like accelerate, prioritize, without delay. And some have said, rightly, the Assembly is sovereign. The Assembly can direct the Council, can instruct the Council, can give guidance to the Council. One thing is clear, that everybody seems to be in support of ICAO being a modern organization of good governance, including the issue of ethics framework and protection of whistleblower. It is also important that staff should be protected in order that nobody take advantage of the whistleblower policy for malicious defamation and libel. So, Mr. President, I think that we can find a language in this text that underscores the importance that this Assembly attaches to this issue, that does not convey the question as to whether that particular policy was reviewed by the Assembly, that we tell the Council and instruct the Council of the urgency for immediate implementation or without delay of this, and give the appropriate instruction to the Council and to the Secretariat to proceed with ensuring that this policy, and in particular the service code, the incorporation of the service code is done and it becomes applicable to the staff. Under our rule, the service code is what provides the policy on staff rules. Having said that, the representative of the United States is right. We have to work in the spirit of what has been approved. If we can find such a formulation for 51.C, I'm sure that we can find compromise among the members of this assembly, the states at this assembly. And I look at those who have taken the floor. The assembly currently is split into a slight majority and a significant minority. And we still have very important issues to discuss. And I do not think that this matter should serve as the basis of division that will make it difficult for us to complete the assembly on time, particularly that the 218th session starts in 2 weeks. Thank you, President of the Assembly.
Thank you, President of the Council. Singapore.
Thank you, President. Both presidents, I guess. While I agree that there are differences in this room this morning, I also have a sense there agreement on the need for strong governance, the need for whistleblowing policy, and in particular, I think there's agreement that the whistleblowing policy that the Council has approved in June 2019 has got the consensus of all in this room. In this regard, I wonder whether it's possible for us to focus on the areas where we can agree. But just a reminder also, I think hearing from the room, there was an existing whistleblowing policy in place for protection against retaliation. The whistleblowing policy that was approved by the government, by the Council in June is an enhancement aligning with the UN best practices. So based on this agreement and also the strong push for immediate implementation, could I propose a slight rewording of the report under 51.5, where the Assembly strongly endorses the whistleblowing policy approved by Council in June 2019 and directs Council with its immediate implementation. And then and the Assembly also further endorses the changes to the ethics framework, which is already in place with under the Service Code. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. India.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just thank the Administrative Commission for the work that they have put in, and also the Secretariat for the support, and such a wonderful debate this morning. In fact, it's quite encouraging. The intervention by the US Ambassador and subsequently the assurance by the Secretary General also tries to lay down this point that there is no ambiguity as far as the acceptance, and I should also add the President of the Council, there is no ambiguity as far as the acceptance of a service code in place or the whistleblower policy in place. In a world that is thinking binary, either 0 or 1, India, like Brazil, Argentina, Australia, and to some extent UK, would like to be 0.75. We try to think a little bit decimal. There are 4 entities: the legal, the ethical, the horse, and the cart. And that's what we see in this room. The question is whether you put the legal aspect, like the Legal Bureau Director talked about the appointed date. Normally all documents come with an implementation on the appointed day, so-and-so, so-and-so. So there is an issue. You're trying to put the horse before the cart. When it comes to ethical and you try to push the ethical aspect of it, then there is another cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. The question is, and I would just like to give a good example. The ambassador from US made an intervention about the just culture. He didn't use the term, but then he talked about it. We had in India, in Delhi, the separation minima of 5 nautical miles from an appointed date. From one particular day, it was 5 nautical miles. The previous day, a controller had a separation between 2 aircraft, which was 4 nautical miles. He was pulled up. And from the next day, it was 3 nautical miles, and people were encouraged to do 3 nautical miles. So I would leave this to this august audience to think about this. So the question is, there is greater agreement, and I don't see much. I mean, the Singapore delegate happened to give a text change. I think 51.5C per se, as is where, seems to be okay to India. It says further endorse immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy approved by the Council in June 2019. Was it approved? Yes. Now the question is immediate implementation. It's a question of semantics. Whatever within, and the President also explained that the Council had certain views. He just happened to read the abstract, and the Legal Bureau also gave its clarification. So this text is only to tell the Assembly, which is a supreme sovereign body, which consists of all the states here, to go ahead and tell the Council to do as what has already been done, follow up the work, and do in future what ought to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. President of the Council and the Secretary General and the Commission and everyone for their clarification. And Canada, like many others who took the floor before, fully support the report of the Commission, and in particular 51.5.C. I would like to perhaps to mention a bit of background. In June, when the Council approved the policy, it was a belief of Canada and of many others that our approval meant that it was effective immediately. I say that because I think it was referred to before by on the floor that the month before we did approve the ethic framework, and the ethic framework became effective immediately. So in terms of HR issues, they are, I think, in the same general basket of measures, and one was treated immediately and the other one apparently not. The whistleblower policy is a fundamental concept of good governance for any modern organization, as the President said. It's already in place in New York. So this organization is even late, I would say. It should, in applying those standards. So it's been 3 months since the Council approved it. And based on some of the comments, I'm not sure when it is going to be effective, if it is not effective already. If we have to wait for all the administrative work to be done, so it could be still months away. So I think it's too much of an important issue to delay. And I think to say it in 51.5.c that it is effective immediately, it's the least we can do. So, and I believe that the Assembly, by endorsing this, will send a strong signal and will affirm the importance of the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy. Thank you very much.
Legal Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor again. I have listened carefully to the intervention of Canada and would thank delegation of Canada for mentioning that. Yes, you are right in the case of the ethic framework updated in 2017. There was some kind of immediate action. But I would like to clarify that the immediate action is still quite vague. What does immediate? 1 minute after? At the same time? Or 2 days later? But I could assure you we have checked the records, and in fact, it's a few days after that the President of the Council mentioned that this was adopted and promulgated effective when the CDAC, means the decision of the Council, has been circulated and approved. So that date was not the date that Council actually approved, was the date when the Council approved the decision circulating among its members. So there is still a gap there. So that's why I'm asking, when you say immediate, to be precise, given to the governing body, what do you mean by immediate? That's my question. Thank you.
Poland.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I wish to thank Secretary General and the President of the Council and Secretariat for the explanations and the clarifications. The definition of immediately or immediate reaction, I think it's in mind of lawyers, so 5 lawyers, 7 opinions. I will try to be consistent. The Poland would like to echo and fully support that has been stated by all European countries which given the voice before. And we would like also support the Brazil, United States of America, Argentina, and New Zealand. Poland finds the whistleblower policy in meaning of protection against retaliation and essential components of an organization's accountability and integrity. ICAO is a special aid agency of the United Nations. If United Nations has a policy, we fully agree that ICAO must have one in place, and whistleblower policy simply must be implemented sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. United States.
Mr. President, thanks again for the floor, and I'll be very brief. And I appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank the President and Secretary General both for their remarks, as I think we are moving towards the right effort. And actually, I want to thank LEB for his remarks. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But I also want to thank everyone in here today who suddenly have gotten interested in this critically important issue. And so every one of you should know that during our extraordinary March 13th session, numerous members stated at that time that we would indeed, and this was after the Secretary General said we need to do this, it was after the President said we need to do it, that we would adhere to the spirit of the UN standard whistleblower policy until we had actually finalized this in Council. The President included that in his CDEC, and I thank him for that. And so everyone should know that we had agreed in March that we would maintain a UN standard, the spirit of it, until everything was done. But I need to thank Canada for bringing up a point that I was about to bring up, because the Legal Bureau just basically said that the ethics reform was in place on June 29th, 2018, the day Council passed the ethics reform, creating the Ethics and Investigation Committee. The service code had not been finished. Everybody had not been put on the website at that time. So it's fascinating that what was appropriate in June of 2018, and the Legal Bureau even soon thereafter appointed their member of the Investigations Committee. So clearly they accepted the fact that there was an Investigations Committee and it was stood up. And for those of you who don't know, there are actually 4 investigations underway as a result of this Investigations Committee today. And some of those people actually are investigations or are a result of whistleblowers. But I just want to say what we've just heard is in June of 2018, ethics reform and the Investigations Committee was implemented immediately, even though the service code, I'm not even sure if the service code is even on the website at this point, considered finished. So it's a very good point that Canada made in that, in June of 2018, when it was adopted by the Council, it was immediate for that service code reform. But in June of 2019, that wasn't appropriate. And I appreciate the President reading the language as well. I think what they said was outstanding issues, the number of issues by the staff committee, and these would be considered in the 2018 session. If I recall, those concerns had nothing to do with the protection against retaliation policy. It was primarily about how do you appeal if you've been accused of something. It was, and these are the types of things we need to listen to, but it had nothing to do with the policy itself. Thank you very much.
President of the Council.
I'm sorry. I will please request Council members. You said this meeting is being webcast, and it is being webcast. I will please request Council members to be careful in quoting things. I read the language of the decision of the Council. If you wish, I can read the language of the decision of the Council in 2018 to set up an investigation committee. And the Council purposely, in setting up a committee, said the committee will be set up with immediate effect. It's in the Council decision. The Council did not decide that with respect to this policy. Recognize there are some things to be done, and it will be brought to the Council in 2018 session for incorporation. Please, let's not Council members cause states to have inadvertent understanding of what actually happened. It's my responsibility as the President of the Council to lay out the facts as they are. That is why I decided to take the floor again. please, if you're going to quote or make statements, let it be factual to the issues as decided as at that time by the Council. The Assembly is sovereign. The Assembly can direct the Council to carry out, to do something, or instruct the Council to do something. Like I said, the word that sticks out is the Assembly endorsing a document that was not placed before the Assembly. If the decision is Assembly requests the Council to ensure immediate implementation, there will be no problem with that. But for the Assembly supports immediate implementation, there will be no problem with that. The word here that I think, from my own perspective, is endorse, which will mean that the whistleblower policy was considered by this Assembly. I don't think there will be too much amendment to make, Mr. President, to say the Assembly supports rather than endorse, which will create impression that we had a document in front of us. So we still have you have on the screen a very long list of speakers. This is the list of the issue. We still have the issue of the environment pending before us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, President of the Council. If you'll permit me, I'll make a few comments here as well. That certainly all the comments have stated, all the delegations, interventors have stated support for a whistleblower policy. I believe we are all in agreement of such a policy. I believe we're also all in agreement of the urgency for the implementation of such a policy. I too am of the opinion that the word endorse has certain connotations or meanings, and as such, perhaps we could consider replacing the word, as was just suggested, invites the Assembly to support the immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy. I think that conveys the spirit of what we're trying to, the intention of what we're trying to achieve. One is that we are all in agreement of the policy and also the urgency within which to implement such a policy. I provide those comments. Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I apologize for asking for the floor once again. It is clear to us that the disagreement is on the term immediate. I have a proposal. Could we set a date in agreement with the Secretary General and with the advice from DLEB for amending the terms of the service code? Could we, by consensus, set a date for implementation? The distinguished representative of the United States has raised a cogent point, which is that we can't leave this issue open-ended. Could we set a date, Mr. President? Thank you.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia, for that intervention. And just following on that, perhaps we could set that date as no later than the 218th session of the Council. Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call the distinguished delegates to adhere to the Chicago Convention. For Article 49K, we must adhere to, well, Article 58 of the Convention says that the issues that we are dealing with now do not stem from the Council. We are wasting time on our discussion here. Why should we discuss any standards here? Thank you.
Thank you. Costa Rica.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we're very grateful for all of the valuable contributions, especially that of the Council President of the Council. I think in the Spanish version, in 51.5c, it says respaldar. That's the Spanish verb. And maybe that's more appropriate than endorse, although the interpreter points out respaldar could be either endorse or support. In a control room, there are always very clear procedures set out. And when a pilot gets in touch with the ATC, sometimes there are instructions and phraseology, and the phraseology is very specific and it has to be adhered to. So it's extremely important for that phraseology to be correct, and the instructions have to be correct. When flying an aircraft, it is essential for the instructions to be followed to the letter. So when it comes to aviation, what are the vectors that the Assembly has to give to the Council for them to follow? And the aim of all of this is to protect aviation security. We want the flight to land safely without running out of fuel. Thank you.
Thank you. Colombia.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to add something to what LEB said, I was very pleased to hear their explanations. And I would like to speak English at this point to read the definition of the word immediate.
Immediate, instantaneous, without delay. Yo creo que no cabe mucho.
I don't think there's much room for misinterpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. France.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to say that my delegation shares the same questions and concerns as those which were just expressed by Canada regarding the immediate or rapid implementation. From our point of view, it is only when the Council decides that a decision should be applied later that this should be done. And so, therefore, we would like to see the immediate implementation and the incorporation into the service code. This must be done as soon as possible. We heard during this session quite a division in the interventions. There was the proposal of the United States, of Singapore, but I would like to say that my delegation, so that we may move forward to the other topics we must discuss, supports the proposal that you have made, Mr. President and Mr. President, regarding changing the word endorse for the word support in paragraph 51.5c. And with this as the sole modification, we can accept this as a change to the report of the Administrative Commission and not as a standard good practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, dear delegates. Uganda has listened clearly with suggestions that have been presented by the President and the Presidents of the Council. But Uganda's view really feels that the proposed amendments are not clear enough. So Uganda fully supports the position that have been presented by Nigeria, Tanzania, China, and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Zambia would like to support the proposal by the President of the Council, seconded by the President of the Assembly, which is that in order to avoid giving the impression that the whistleblower policy was presented to the Assembly for consideration and endorsement, the word endorsement should be replaced by the word support in item 51(5)(c). Thank you.
Thank you. South Africa.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm happy the President of the Council made the statement that he made, because if we were to be given the platform as the Council to explain to the Assembly what transpired in the Council when these issues were discussed, we might need 3 weeks for that, because you'll have 36 different versions of explanations. So it is not really, as South Africa, we feel that, trying to bring that, it gives an incomplete explanation of sequence to which may end up misleading the Assembly. So if, Mr. President, you were to allow Council members to try to explain what transpired, I think then it will leave with no choice that other members will want to respond, because if we are not happy with the explanation of what transpired. So I'm happy that the President has made that statement, and I hope as Council members will refrain from trying to explain to the Assembly what happened at the Council session when we were discussing this issue. Mr. President, I support the proposal by the President to replace the word endorse with the word support. However, the issue of immediate, as you may still see, there's still a difference of what exactly it means, although that I believe it can be taken care of, because to me, what does it entail? Implementation of the whistleblower policy. Because then I know we have a difference of understanding what it means. Because as I stated earlier in my intervention, the implementation of the whistleblower policy is the incorporation of the policy aspects into the service code. And you cannot implement something that has to be incorporated into the service code before those have been incorporated in the service code and properly approved in terms of the ICAO prescripts. So if then in this instance, the immediate implementation, we mean that the ICAO Secretariat should quickly incorporate those and submit to the Council in the session that is coming, the 218th session. If the immediate implementation refers to that, then it will not be a problem. Because we cannot, Mr. President, sit here and want to have something applying with retrospect, which is the sense that is coming from some of the interventions. The implementation must be, it can be with effect from the date of the approval. So since the
the whistleblower policy is not a document that can be implemented on its own. It is impossible to implement it with the date of approval, unless if then they had submitted that in anticipation of approval with the proposed amendments to the staff rules, and the staff rules are approved by the council, then the council can approve the staff rules and say they apply with immediate effect. But then they cannot apply from 2 days or from 1 hour before approval. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you. United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very, 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 very brief. I fully support what is, as I understand, we're just going to take the word endorse and we're going to place it with supports the immediate implementation as proposed by you and the President of the Council, France, Zambia, and others. We could end this debate very quickly. Thank you for that suggestion, President of the Council, and I think we can move on from here very quickly. Thank you.
Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President, for having given me the floor the second time. I listened very carefully to all of the interventions, and after the very relevant clarifications provided by the Director of LEB, the Secretary General, and the President of the Council, this should remove all ambiguity, and therefore we cannot adopt 51.5C as it is. We should let the Council finish its work in the 2 weeks that remain. And thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Germany.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are very much in favor of your proposal, changing the word endorse into the word support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Botswana.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the President of the Council and the Director of the Legal Bureau for the explanations they've given. One gets the sense that we hang up on semantics. And the semantic in this case, I think, is to do with immediate. Now, if one considers there's some process that needs to be followed before something can happen, then immediate, in my mind, would be upon conclusion of whatever that process would be. And in this case, if one reads the text just above, it says that this would be incorporated in the ICAO Service Code. Presumably, that process needs to conclude before this immediacy happens. So one gets the sense that in some of the interpretation, the immediacy means retrospective. Now, if there is a process that is approved, and that process makes any sense, then one expects that the process would be allowed to conclude. If we must expedite the process, fine. But in my mind, that can only happen after the process is concluded. And in that case, I get the sense that the date of the 218th section would be a point at which such a process would allow for the consideration of whether the process is concluded or not. I thank you, Chairman, President.
Thank you. Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Japan clearly agrees with the remarks made by Secretary General, United States, Australia, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Brazil, and others supporting 51.5C. Japan, as a Council member, can accept the proposal made by the President. The wording supports immediate implementation of the whistleblower policy to enhance human resources management of the ICAO as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Lebanon.
Mr. President, I I support the intervention of France state, and I think to get out from the division in this controversy, to replace endorsement by word support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must admit I've been following the discussion with great interest. But what is very clear from our point of view is that such a whistleblower policy, to get this in place, is very important. And I think what has been expressed by many member states here is a concern that it takes a long time. So instead of discussing what immediately would mean, I think it's a clear message to try to cut red tape and get this in place as soon as possible, since it is of such a great importance. I appreciate very much the proposal by the President of the Council to change one word in paragraph 51.5, letter C, and if that is what it takes, then we warmly support the proposal. Thank you very much.
Greece.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. In order to facilitate the discussion and to be able to move forward, Mr. President, Greece can accept the proposal by the President of the Council, and therefore we would leave the rest of 51.5C without any other change. We also support the interventions by France, Zambia, the United States, and others in the same vein. Thank you.
Thank you. Italy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you again for giving us the floor for a second time. Thank you, first of all, to the Secretariat for the information explanation provided to us. We fully agree with the proposal coming from the President of the Council. In order to save time, I think we have to move forward in our work. We have not a lot of time in front of us. And in a sense, we fully support what has been said by France, Zambia, US, Germany, Lebanon, Norway, and Greece in replacing the words endorse with support. Thank you.
Thank you. Denmark.
Thank you. We support the change of the word endorse to support as a single change in line with the comments from Zambia, France, the United States, Norway, and many others.
Thank you. Canada.
Canada fully supports the proposal of the President to change the verb endorse for the verb support. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the President of the Council, the Section, and the Director of Legal External Bureau for their explanation. I support the proposal of the Council President, supported by the Assembly President, to change the word endorse with support. And as regards to the word immediate, I fully concur with the comments of Zambia and others. Thank you.
China.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me this second opportunity to speak. The Chinese side feels that this discussion exemplifies what the American delegate said just now about being open and transparent. And in this sense, the Chinese delegation entirely supports the Council President's suggestion to change the word endorse to support in 51.5C. I think this exemplifies the rule of law. It is the spirit. We just have to observe the correct procedures. Thank you.
Colleagues, we still have a number of interventions on the screen here, but perhaps I could summarize what has been said and if the need arises for us to have further interventions. I believe the feeling I'm now getting from the delegations is full support to replace the word endorse with support. On the matter of the immediacy, as I had stated earlier, I got the feeling as well that we were all of the impression of the need for the urgency of the implementation. And I believe the delegate from Botswana put it very, very nicely for us, that this immediacy would go through a certain process, and if necessary to expedite, to get it done within that time frame. I believe our text also indicates that the matter will be presented at the 218th session of the Council, which will be within another 2 weeks of the completion of this assembly. I therefore suggest that the change that we make to the text of 51.5C is to replace the word endorse with support. And if that enjoys the support of the delegates, then we can move on to the other items. I will take a few of the comments that I see here. Thank you. Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that you have made a very good proposal. We could go along with it. It's a pity that we cannot endorse it, but I understand the problems that some countries can have with that, but I think it's the best way to move forward, so I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. India.
Mr. President, that the majority seem to endorse. India also supports the substitution of endorse with supports. But having said that, I'm taking the floor because whenever this is done, Mr. President, India wants to make a small comment about Resolution 50/1. Thank you.
Thank you. Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Austria fully supports the change endorse with support. Thank you.
Thank you. South Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. President. South Sudan stands with the change which is made by Mr. President to change the word endorse to be replaced with support.
Thank you. New Zealand.
Thank you, Mr. President. New Zealand supports the change of the word from endorse to support. Thank you.
Egypt.
شكرا السيد الرئيس للسماح.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a second time. We strongly support the comments by a number of delegations, Nigeria, South Africa, China in particular, Russian Federation and others. But at this time, we really do have a reservation on the substance of 51.5C, and we support the proposal of the President of the Council to reach a consensus so as to remove all ambiguity and move forward. So we support the change from endorse to support in the text. And we still have a reservation about deleting the word immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. United States.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you so much again. But in your summary, you said some kind of dependency with the 218th session. Immediate, as the representative of Columbia said, is immediate, and it has nothing to do with any further action, although we will be considering in WGGE the things that I mentioned earlier, the staff concerns about appeals and things like that. But immediate has no dependency whatsoever on the fall council session. So we support the one-word change, but no summary that includes some dependency for execution of this on the following council is appropriate. Thank you.
Perhaps my intervention created a little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah.
It was just to replace the word
Thank you.
endorse with support.
Good, thank you.
Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pakistan fully supports the proposal regarding the, and for what the President has made regarding the endorsements.
Lebanon.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving Lebanon the floor a second time. I continue to support your proposal, but I would suggest replacing the reference to paragraph 3.1 of A40 Working Paper 29 and say instead paragraph 51 for the previous paragraph in this text, 51.4. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, accepted. Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. We fully support the Council President's consensus proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sweden can support the proposal to replace the words endorse with support, and that we would like to encourage the Assembly to move on to other matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Singapore.
Thank you, President. Singapore supports the proposal by the President of the Council to replace endorse with support. Thank you.
Thank you. Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. We can accept the change from endorse to support, and we also maintain our position on deletion of the word immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. Togo supports the proposal made by the President of the Council. So use the word support instead of endorse. Regarding the word immediately, we think that we should refer to ICAO jurisprudence. It's not the first time that the word immediately is being used in an ICAO decision. So for implementation, we need to refer to what's already been done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, we have a solution. Thanks for everyone. However, I would like to encourage the Legal Bureau to work with this, to process this issue without any delay, please.
Thank you. Legal Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have to clarify again, even though I thanks the intervention by delegation of Australia, is not in the hand of Legal Bureau. Legal Bureau is only serving the Council and providing advice to the Council. Thank you.
Secretary General.
Just to address to the Finland representative's remarks. I believe during the Administrative Commission, the Secretariat already made very clear we already started this incorporation of the whistleblower policy into our service code immediately after the Council's decision. This exercise we already started, and now actually we implement the Council decision as I indicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Estonia supports the change from endorse to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, Japan fully supports the President's proposal to replace endorse with support. Thank you.
Thank you. Myanmar.
Myanmar, thank you, Mr. President. Myanmar fully support to Council President the change of the words and endorse. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for your discussions on the matter. I believe we now have a way forward on this item in replacing the word, I'll take one more, Tunisia.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to express our support for the proposal by the President of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe we have a way forward on this matter with replacing the word endorse with support. And to make reference to the paragraph 51.4 as above. Do we have any further comments on the report that was presented from the Administrative Commission? Cuba.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to refer to 52, item 52. So page 52-1, 52, paragraph 52.4b. For those who participated in the commission, this drafting might be very clear, but for those of us reading it after the fact, we think it would be good to specify where it says, note the recommended approach detailed in section 5. Section 5 of what, please? Is it a working paper, an ICAO document, a report? So could we say what section 5 actually is? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cuba. Yes, that will be clarified. Spain.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a point on agenda item 42 on the budget for the next triennium. Specifically, we're referring to paragraph 42.8. Here it says the Secretary stated was a product of involved process between the Council Finance Committee and expressed appreciation for the work of the chair of the Finance Committee, but it wasn't just the Finance Committee, it was everyone involved, the Secretariat, the Finance section, the Director, Monica Gemede, and Lynette Lynn, who did an excellent job as acting chief and helping to draft the budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Colleagues, I'm not seeing 42 in my documentation.
Mr. President, it's toward the back of the document.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's at the back. Spain, can you just repeat, please?
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I was referring to agenda item 42, which is toward the end of the document. It's about the budget for the triennium. And I am referring to paragraph 42.8, where it says the Secretary expressed appreciation for the work of the chairperson of the Finance Committee, and I would like for that recognition to extend to the whole of the Finance Committee and also to the Secretariat, in particular the Finance Branch headed by Monica Gemede and Lynette Lim as acting chief. They did an excellent job working with the Council to develop the budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yes, accepted. India.
Thank you for letting me take the floor again. Mr. President, and this is regarding Resolution 50/1. We do not propose any change. we are extremely happy that the Swiss Federal Audit Office is being appointed. I mean, the Assembly confirms their appointment. The only thing is, like, we had taken this up earlier in the Council also. We'd like to know that India was a close second, but it was more because of the selection criteria. So my appeal again is that in future, the selection criteria be so firmed up that everybody gets a good opportunity based on the merits of the case. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to fully support the proposal made by Spain regarding paragraph 42.8. Having been in the Finance Committee and also having presided over it, I know just how hard all the secretariat that is involved in this committee has worked, so I fully support the inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Colombia.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colombia witnessed the immense efforts deployed by Secretariat, the Secretary General, and all of her team, and the persons mentioned by Spain specifically. We completely agree with all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, given the discussions that we have had on the report of the Administrative Commission, do we now have approval of this report? It appears that we do. Thank you very much for the very robust discussions on this matter. We will now move on to the approval of reports from the Technical Commission, and I invite the chairperson to present the reports.
Good morning, distinguished delegates. Mr. President of the Assembly, allow me to begin by congratulating you on your excellent handling of this Assembly. I also take the opportunity to congratulate the President of the Council, the entire Council of ICAO, and the Air Navigation Commission in the preparation of documentation for the budget the Council has put forward to the Assembly. It is evident that there are many competing needs for the resources of ICAO, and prioritizing activities will not be an easy task. I also like to thank the Secretary General and his staff for their outstanding support and the efficient organization of the Assembly. It is amazing how much work goes on behind the scenes, and you and your staff have done an amazing job. As the chair of the Technical Commission, I'm presenting the reports on agenda items 27 to 30. The reports are provided in working papers 606, 607, 608, and 609, respectively. I would like to thank the first Vice Chair, Mr. Heida Yaltin, and the second Vice Chair, Mr. Ajime Yoshimura, for their readiness to step in during this very heavy work program. And finally, I would like to thank all of the participants in the Technical Commission who work in a spirit of cooperation and friendship, which allowed us to complete our considerable workload. The Technical Commission held 5 meetings between 24th September and 1st October 2019. Representatives from some 182 contracting states and 25 observer delegations attended one or more meetings of the Commission. The Commission addressed 220 working papers plus 4 draft reports. Under agenda item 27, the Technical Commission reviewed the annual reports of the Council and noted the work accomplished in the safety and air navigation fields during the past 3 years. Under agenda item 28, The Commission reviewed both the third edition of the Global Aviation Safety Plan, GASP, and the sixth edition of the Global Air Navigation Plan, GAMP. The Commission noted that the revised GASP sets forth the global strategic direction for safety and provides a framework in which regional, sub-regional, and national implementation plans are to be developed and implemented, thus ensuring harmonization and coordination of efforts aimed at improving international civil aviation safety. The Commission agreed on the need for ICAO to continue its implementation support under the established Global Aviation Safety Program, including tools, guidance, and capacity building workshops to assist states and stakeholders to meet the GASP goals. The Commission also agreed on the need to increase collaborative endeavors through voluntary mechanisms and for states and industry entities to actively participate in their respective regional aviation safety groups. The Commission further agreed on the need for ICAO, through the appropriate group of experts, to consider the inclusion of a common section on the importance of building states' civil aviation management capacities in forthcoming editions of the GASP. With respect to the GAMP, and aligned with the idea that innovation is necessary to bring benefits to all stakeholders, the Commission welcomed the word-based format of the GAMP, which makes easily accessible air navigation policies, priorities, and strategies for use by all states and key decision makers. The Commission further agreed that ICAO should make use of partnerships with large-scale air traffic management modernization programs for the development of aviation system block upgrade elements and related ICAO provisions. To meet the requirements of the rapid pace of technological innovations, as well as state and industry operating models, the Commission recommended that ICAO, keeping in mind the principles enshrined in the Chicago Convention, review and enhance its standard-making processes to operate in a more agile manner, applying a cross-domain approach and promoting integrated risk management to address new initiatives and emerging issues in a timely manner. Mr. President, the Commission agreed that Member States, Planning and Implementation Regional Groups, PERGs, and all members of the aviation community should be urged to continue improving the air navigation system in line with the GAMP so that it can respond to global, regional, and local opportunities and adapt to challenges in a timely, harmonized, and orderly manner. The Commission agreed that states should be urged to implement, following a proper operational assessment and prioritization by means of a performance-based approach, the necessary infrastructure components to support the existing and projected volumes of traffic in alignment with the GAMP. The Commission recommended interlinkages between national air navigation plans and safety management systems as part of the interconnection of the GAMP and the GASP. Consequently, the Commission recommends that the Assembly endorse both the third edition of the GASP and the sixth edition of the GAMP through Resolution 28/1, ICAO Global Planning for Safety and Air Navigation. With respect to the protection of safety information, the Commission agreed to submit for adoption by the Plenary Resolution 28/2, Protection of Accident and Incident Investigation Records, and Resolution 28/3, Protection of Safety Data and Safety Information collected for maintaining or improving safety and of flight recorder recordings in normal operations. The Commission reviewed the outcomes of the 13th Air Navigation Conference and urged states to action the recommendations addressed to them. The Commission recognized that holding divisional type meetings ahead of assembly sessions allows the Technical Commission to focus on global plans and policy decisions, thereby improving the efficiency of assemblies. The Commission recognizes that this is an efficient means to put forward additional technical work for ICAO in due time for budget preparation for the following triennium. Finally, the Commission reviewed the consolidated statement of continuing ICAO policies and associated practices related specifically to air navigation and agreed to submit for adoption by the Plenary Resolution 28/4, Consolidated Statement of Continuing ICAO Policies and Associated Practices related specifically to air navigation. Mr. President, that concludes my introduction of the report on Agenda Item 28. And as you can see, the deliberations of the Technical Commission were wide-ranging and thorough. At this point, rather than going into each agenda item report in detail, and in line with the intended focus of the Technical Commission on global plans and policy decisions in order to improve the efficiency of assemblies, we could take the Technical Commission reports as presented. That being said, I wish to highlight 4 other resolutions submitted by the Commission to the plenary. On Agenda Item 29, Resolution 29/1, Regional Implementation Support Mechanisms, and Resolution 29/2, Regional Cooperation and Assistance to Resolve Safety Deficiencies, Establishing Priorities and Setting Measurable Targets. On Agenda Item 30, Resolution 30/1, New Entrants, and Resolution 30/2, Global Provisions for Design, Certification and Operations of Water Aerodromes. With that suggestion to you, Mr. President, I will conclude my remarks and hand the discussion back to you for consideration of the reports on agenda items 27 to 30. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairperson, for your presentation. Thank you as well and your team for the work that has been completed in the Technical Commission. Colleagues, I now invite questions or comments on the reports that have been circulated, and we just had a presentation on them. Working Paper 606, Working Paper 607, Working Paper 608, and Working Paper 609. Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to suggest an amendment to 30.58 because in our view the incitement of the Working Paper 85 is not fully reflected in the current wording. We also discussed this in the Commission. The working paper does not only invite member states to implement the network-centric approach, but to do so swiftly. And therefore, our suggestion is that we add in the third line, where it says that it advocates a collaborative global network-centric planning of airspace design, to write to advance efforts to implement. That would be our suggestion, and this was also the opinion of the Commission, if I remember correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Accepted. Spain.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. we would like to refer to document 609 as well. 3048, paragraph 3048 refers to document 149 presented to the Commission. And at the end of this paragraph, we have a suggestion, and I'll read it in English.
The Commission agreed that the Council should consider y sigue expanding relevant guidance material. Nuestra sugerencia.
Our suggestion is to use the Australian strategy for drafting and delete expanding relevant guidance material to address. And this is because the Council should consider this matter taking into account all possible options, not just guidance material. And moreover, guidance material was not actually suggested by any of the countries. So to give broader scope for considering this matter, we suggest avoiding the phrase that I mentioned, expanding relevant guidance material to address. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Acceptable. ICCAIA.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, everyone. I refer to Working Paper 609, paragraph 30.74. During the Technical Commission's deliberations on the report on this agenda item, ICCAIA made an intervention concerning the initial draft of this paragraph and the recommendations in respect of helicopter operations. We are grateful to the Secretariat for their efforts in redrafting this paragraph and would respectfully suggest a slight amendment to the second paragraph, second sentence of paragraph 30.74 to fully capture the Technical Commission's discussions and its support of recommendations put forth in Working Paper 272. Our suggestion for the second sentence is as follows. The Commission supported the recommendations in the working paper, noting that helicopter operations were on the existing work program of several expert groups, and it continues from there. This suggestion, the text has been shared with the Secretariat. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. France.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to everyone who's worked on these reports. I would like to support the intervention that was just made by ICAO on 30.74. Indeed, it is more logical for the reference to be in passive and for the action to be in the active form. That's more consistent and clear. Also, I would like to propose a small editorial to paragraph 3032. And it would be in line with our text, which makes reference to A3711, and this spoke about the approaches, instrument runway approaches. And so we would like to propose to replace the word international, which is currently in the text, by the word instrument. And so we'll have instrument runways by 2016.
Thank you. Accepted. United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a comment regarding or requested addition to item 30.34 on working paper 296. In the first sentence, we would like to add after the term considering, put in a statement manual flight control piloting skills, comma, and this is just to ensure that it covers what was actually provided in the paper description on the floor.
Thank you. Accepted. Cuba.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are referring to page 1 of Working Paper 609, item 30, and Resolution 30/1. I must say that we have our doubts that could have been clarified earlier, but it's never too late. And I'm asking a question now that I wasn't able to earlier. We're talking about a new definition for new entrants in the UAS framework and UTM. And we're clear about that, but our query is with regard to new entrants. This is a definition that's already in resolution on CORSIA. And when you read the substance of the resolution, there might not be any doubts, but when we talk about new entrants and the definition that exists, there's a third recognizing that says that the operation should accommodate new entrants, and I think this might be a bit too broad. So our question or query or concern is that we need clarification and assurance that this new definition has nothing to do with the new entrants in the CORSIA. And when we talk about the probability of reviewing other provisions, we're not talking about the CORSIA resolution. So we would like for that to be made perfectly clear for our peace of mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to clarify for Cuba that the definition that is available in Annex 16 refers only to the application of the term for environmental protection in CORSIA. This definition applies only for this purpose. We recognize that that may in the future create some opportunity for confusion, and as we continue our work in the organization, I'm sure we'll start to refine the application, perhaps make new definitions, but that was not raised during the technical commission, and it would be inappropriate for us to enter into that late change at this point, I believe. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Ghana.
Well, I'm speaking as the chairman of the Technical Commission. To add to the Secretariat's clarification, within the resolution on new entrants, it states in the preambular clause, recognizing that for the purposes of this resolution, the term new entrants refers to higher airspace and unmanned aircraft system traffic management operations. So it's very, very clear. It's been clearly defined. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for those comments, and thank you for the comments that we have fielded from the floor. Delegates, do we then have approval of the reports of the Technical Commission? It appears that we do. Thank you very much for that. The reports are then approved. Colleagues, we are beyond the hour of high noon. As such, we will have to break here. We will reconvene at 2 p.m. and we will continue with the plenary to complete the agenda items, the approval of reports from the Executive Committee. Thank you.